Development Subcommittee meeting. I am Kate Gallego, joined by Danny Valenzuela and Sal DeCiccio. Councilwoman Pastor will be joining us shortly. We're going to begin the meeting by looking at the meeting minutes. Have my colleagues had a chance to review?
I have, and I'll move their approval.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. And now we have an exciting recognition for the first ever graduates of the Neighborhood Leadership Studio, which is a program designed to engage residents of key neighborhood groups, sustain leadership and participation, and build neighborhood capacity. The participants have completed 10 hours of core classroom instruction and hands-on activities, 2 elective courses, and they've been out and about, including visiting our Public Works Materials Recycling Facility. They have the opportunity to write their own grant application for a community project funded by the Public Works Department and conduct projects related to neighborhoods, including community engagement, engaging residents in community events, neighborhood schools, installation of neighborhood identification markers, all to create healthy, safe, and sustainable neighborhoods, working on safety, including those better curb addresses, helping our first responders and others, installing solar lighting and traffic calming devices to improve walkability and biking. And it has benefited more than 6,524 households within their neighborhoods. And no surprise for a project in partnership with Public Works, investments in recycling and composting, educating approximately 600 youth and adults about recycling, reusing, and repurposing materials in the city of Phoenix. So thank you for helping us advance our goals to be a stronger and more sustainable city. Congratulations to the first Neighborhood Leadership Studio graduating class, Shadow Ridge from District 2, I Love My Neighborhood District 3, Longview East from District 4, Cordova from District 5, Highland Estates from District 6, Los Osos from District 7, and Green Gables from District 8. If my colleagues are willing, we would like to do a photo with our graduates and congratulate them in person. So thank you for your leadership. Thank you to our graduates for helping us make Phoenix history and stronger neighborhoods. And with any luck, we'll make the City of Phoenix Twitter account with the great milestone. We have perhaps our longest agenda ever for the Neighborhood Housing and Development Subcommittee, so a very diverse agenda that includes almost every department with which we work. We do have a very short consent agenda on building code construction amendments.
I'll move approval of item 3.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Wonderful, that passes unanimously, so helps us move forward on a variety of issues, including solar energy, energy efficiency, and elevators, a diverse agenda. And now we will have a brief update from our housing director on affordable home loan rent limits and underwriting guidelines. Help our housing partners, again, build sustainable housing communities.
Yes, good morning, Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee. Today, we're going to talk about our rent limits in Housing Department. I need the clicker to advance the slides. Here we go. So the Housing Department receives funding from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD, every year in the form of home funds and community development block grant funds that they then turn around and lend out for low-cost financing to our development partners, nonprofits, and profitable developers to build affordable housing. With our loan funds come restrictions, and some of the restrictions include a 40-year land use restriction to remain affordable for 40 years, to set aside a certain amount of units to rent to low-income folks at 50 or 60% of area median income. And then also, with the 50 or 60% of area median income, we set a rent limit. So you can charge only so much per rent, and it's a maximum that we have set. And what we did was set that back in 2007 in accordance with the area median incomes at 50 and 60% in 2007. We have not changed those rent limits since 2007. And what we're hearing now from our partners in the development community and the property managers of affordable housing is that they're facing increasing costs with their continually trying to provide more and better services to our special needs populations like chronically homeless, and frail elderly and things like that. So their costs are going up. And in addition, rents are going up citywide and area median incomes are going up. So what we're here to talk to you today is about our proposal to increase our rent limits for the first time since 2007 to align with the HUD published home rent limits. And their published rent limits are in accordance with area median incomes for Phoenix, Mesa, Scottsdale, which is the group that they calculate for. What this would require for us, though, is to change our underwriting guidelines, which is a giant document like this, because with any loan, you have to sign a million things for paperwork and have a lot of guidelines. So what we're going to propose is coming back to you later with that change. But first I want to show you a comparison of the rent limits. This is the top is the chart that we had for rent limits set in 2007 in accordance with area median incomes in 2007. And you can see the change in area median incomes since 2007, 2016. The 50 and 60% of AMI have gone up significantly. What we're expecting from our property managers, though, is a gradual increase, and maybe not an increase in total to these rent limits, but it allows them some leeway to go from our artificially low rent limits to something more reasonable for the residents. So what I said before is we have to change our underwriting guidelines, and what we'd like to do is come back to you in the fall when we talk about our whole program and our community priorities and the next call for interest for home and CDBG funds. And we'll talk about the change to our underwriting guidelines. We have a few more changes that we're proposing as well at that time. What we're proposing is that with your approval in the fall, that these rent limits would be effective January 1. And in the meantime, we will work with our property managers and our developer partners on a transition, method of transition, because the rent limits can't automatically change. They have to do some comparisons of market rate rents and things like that just to make sure that the rents are still reasonable and still affordable. They have to be at least 10% lower than market rate in the surrounding area. So we need to work up a process for them to document all of that. And then I want to say also that any rent changes would have to be effective with a new lease. So everyone's rent wouldn't change on January 1. It would only change when their new lease is coming up. And in general, most of us in the affordable housing business will give people at least 6 months before we make any changes anyway. So most of these renters would not see any changes for at least 6 months and then up to a year, depending on when their lease is renewed. We are in this for the long haul with our partners. We expect that 40-year land use restriction to stay in place. We want to maintain affordability of all of our properties, and we want them to maintain sustainability. So we are proposing to make this change to help our partners maintain sustainable properties for affordable housing for the long term. With that, I'll take any questions.
Councilman.
Just a couple. When we talk about the set-asides, oh, sorry.
Mike.
When you talk about the set-asides in the project, so I assume that the entire project may not necessarily be affordable housing, but has to do a set-aside on certain units, is that correct? Do we have a percentage that they have to do, and how does that work?
Is it a percentage?
Or is it just,
So the way that works is we look at the total development cost and the amount of funds, home funds or CDBG funds that we put into. It's like a proration of the total development cost. So it's a set aside based on the amount of money, the amount of funds that go into it, that we loan into the project.
and then, correct me if I'm wrong, and then what ends up happening then is with these projects, they've got to keep these set-asides for a period of time, right? And what is that, like 15 years approximately?
40 years.
40 years?
It's a 40-year
Oh,
restriction.
wow. Okay.
Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee, it's usually a very small set-aside, though, because we loan out up to $1.5 million per project, and most projects cost about, 20 to 30 million. So it's a very low percentage of their units, maybe 10 to 20 units at the most, that they have to maintain.
Depending on the amount of subsidy that they ask up front.
Yes.
I mean, if they're asking for it, then they're required to come up with the rules. They don't have to ask for it, I'd like to, at least in my district, I'd like to get a listing of all these units, or basically the individuals that are using these in my district. The projects. I don't need to know the individual units, just where the projects are in there.
Absolutely, will do.
And these are rent limits, so if there was a nonprofit that had a goal of very, very affordable, they certainly don't have to be at the limit.
Exactly. These are maximum rents that they can charge, and they are free to charge anything lower than the maximum, and many do. Many that serve those special populations of the chronically homeless, the victims of substance abuse, the frail elderly, they charge much lower rents than even our former rent limits.
Fabulous. And I think as we're about to see, we have a lot of this type of housing in and around our downtown, and a variety of different economic changes have occurred, so this will be a good time to have the dialogue if we haven't done it since 2007, and hear from the community about what are the options if we do change the limits, and what would the impact be on both our residents and our housing partners. Wonderful. Well, thank you for the informational update. It will be great to hear what we hear as a result of the meetings and have another tool for sustainable housing.
Thank you.
I think we will ask Cindy to stay up, but be joined by Christine Mackey, our Community and Economic Development Director, for an update on multifamily housing. It'll be a great opportunity. We've been talking a lot about housing in our community, some of the changes that have occurred, what is our housing stock, and where are the needs. So this will be a very interesting update. Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair and subcommittee members. We are here today to talk to you about some very interesting research that we've conducted related to multifamily housing, particularly here in the Central City, how it serves the needs and the demographics of the Central City, while also serving the affordable needs of our citizens, our broad range of citizens in the community. So first, we'll kind of set the scale of where we're working from. If you look at the average commute in metropolitan Phoenix, 22 minutes is considered the average commute. So what we did was we even lowered that down from that. We said, let's look at a 15-minute commute. How far from a reasonable position should we be looking at our data? So the rings that you see in front of you, 0.0, is Central and Van Buren. We selected that because it's kind of the centermost portion of downtown Phoenix. The second ring is at 3 miles, and the third ring is at 5 miles. The third ring is a 10-minute commute, and the second ring is a 10-minute commute, and the third ring is a 15-minute commute. The rectangle that you see is the boundaries of what we consider the Central City. And those boundaries, by our definition, will be 7th Avenue on the west, 16th Street on the east, from Buckeye to Camelback. And that's the area that we studied for the purposes of this area. So first, what we'd like to talk to you about is kind of the demographics of this particular area. One of the things I found most fascinating as we were researching our data is we have still not reached the population that we had in the Central City in 1970. In 1970, we had a population of about 55,000 people. Today, we're just approaching 53,000 in 2016. So what we saw was families left the central city. And what were the reasons that happened? Well, we saw the suburbs grow up. They became connected by freeways, big malls built in our suburbs, and it became a very livable area for people to leave the central city. And as we look at the population that exists today, really fascinating. More than 50% of all of our citizens, actually 57% of all the households in the central city have one person in them. And the average household size of the entire area is still less than 2 people. And that's including single-family residential, high-density residential, and all of the units. So as we look, the other thing that is interesting, of the people that live in the central city, almost about 50% of them make less than $35,000 a year. The next group up, about 30%, are more middle income, and then you see about 22% who are over 75,000 in their average wage. Now let's talk about the people who work in the central city and how that all starts to kind of line up and actually compare. Really fascinating stuff came out of this study. 168,000 people come to work every day in the central city that we just defined. That makes it the largest employment corridor in the valley. Next one behind us would be the Scottsdale Air Park at about 120,000. So it's significantly bigger than that. 43% of them are in business, financial, or professional occupations, and we see that pretty well when we look at the logos on the buildings that kind of surround us. But what fascinated us the most is of that 168,000, just over 3% actually live in the central city. So they're commuting into this market each and every day. Their average payroll is about $64,000, which means that in the central city, we see $10.7 billion in payroll in the central city each and every day. Every day. 10.7 billion in payroll is in this market every day on an annual basis, sir. Yeah, on an annual basis, yes. You are absolutely. We'll get some jobs that skew that number
move.
upwards. But 52% of the people who work in the central city live outside of Phoenix. They live in one of the other 23 communities or another area of Phoenix. So almost 88,000 people leave the central city every day and take their revenue back to the suburbs. What are the challenges that really poses to us? And that's kind of how we lined it up was, here's our demand, here's our supply, here's our workforce, and what challenges does that really propose? As we look at the limit that we have on jobs that we can attract in the market. So the new economy, where we show you a 15-minute commute, you'll remember and I hate to say old days because it was me, in the older days, people wanted to know their workforce in a 10, 20, and 30-minute commute. That's always what they looked at. Beginning about 2007, they looked at a much shorter commute than that. They found their workforce didn't want to make that commute. So they really started to look at more in a 10 to 15-minute commute of that particular workforce. So when we're running demographics for a company looking to locate in the central city, our demographic population is much smaller than you would expect. You'll remember we're still at only about 52,000 people that actually live in the central city. So that puts a limit on the jobs that we can attract into the market. They're looking for an educated workforce and they're looking for a dense workforce. It puts stress on our arterial streets and on our freeway system because these cars have to come and go each and every day into this market. We don't have, our mass transit when it goes out into the suburbs isn't as strong as it is in the city of Phoenix. We have underutilized real estate. And what I mean by that is if you are up on our floor and you're looking out the window, you see a lot of vacant land sites that could be developed as additional residential opportunities. So we're missing those opportunities for people to live in. That lost income, that 52% of the people who live, if we were able to grab them all and bring them into Phoenix, it represents $5.6 billion in payroll that would actually be in the city of Phoenix. We've talked to you now about our demand, our workforce, our demographics, and now we're going to talk to you a little bit about the supply that exists today. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to our researcher extraordinaire, Joseph McEwen, who will give us an overview of what we see in the high-density residential in this market. Joseph?
Thank you, Chris. Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, what we gathered was apartment data from Apartment Insights. And so this was data for apartments with 50 or more units. What we see here is a graph of total units by each mile radius by category. And these include projects that we see currently under construction as if they are completed. For instance, what we see within a 3-mile radius, just over 6,000 units are considered workforce housing units. That's about 51% of all the units that we see within a 3-mile radius. As we go out to 5 miles, we see almost 13,000 workforce housing units. That's about 40% of all the units that we see within a 5-mile radius.
As we did our analysis, what we looked at, and we heard in some of the projects that we brought forward most recently, saying that we need more affordable housing in the downtown market. As you can see by the graphic within that 1 mile of Central and Van Buren, you'll see on the workforce side at about 11% and the affordable side at about 31%. So you see those pretty well balanced. However, what we saw happen, traditionally how the market will work, is that new projects come online and those new projects will set the bar on the rent, which sometimes to keep the occupancy rates will kind of drive the older product down a little bit. New product comes online, the other product goes down a little bit. Over the recession, we didn't see that happen in the downtown market. The only thing during the recession that was building was affordable housing. So from 2005 to 2014, we saw 9 affordable housing projects built, where we only saw 2 market rate projects get built. And so those market rate projects that didn't get built because of the recession didn't allow that normal market setting where the new product builds and the next one goes down a little bit in its cost just to keep its occupancy rates up. We'll see that naturally happen now that we have a number of market rate projects under construction. We'll start to see some of that older product. We may start to see some of that older product reset itself.
In urban corridors around the country, we tend to see more of a balance between single-family and multifamily structures. Within a 5-mile radius of downtown, we see that 41% of households live within multifamily structures. What this chart is showing us is the range of 2-bedroom average rents for market, workforce, and affordable, and their corresponding estimated incomes, given you were to spend the standard 30% of your income on your rent. At a very high level, what this is suggesting is the average household incomes that we see within a 5-mile radius can support the housing options that we have within a 5-mile radius or 15-minute commute.
So as we go back, kind of to talk about to kind of remind you what we've seen here, what we have seen in our analysis is that we do have an adequate supply of workforce housing within that 5-mile radius of downtown, certainly within the 3-mile radius as well. We see a pretty strong workforce housing opportunity that exists there. It has built infrastructure, and it is supported by the transit infrastructure that the city has so thoughtfully invested in. You'll see in just a few minutes, Joseph will show you how those units actually work in existence with mass transit. Really, this has always been the plan. This has always been the plan to connect the central city with light rail, with mass transit, making it really easy for our citizens to be able to move about from their homes to their jobs, to their entertainment options, to the retail that they have. What seemed to be evident to us, and again, we have about a lot of time with this data, what seemed to be evident to us is what we're lacking in the central city is housing options that the workforce suggests, that the employment that's in the central city suggests that we should have, what our jobs suggest that we should have. It seemed to us that the inventory doesn't necessarily match the jobs that exist here today. So let us show you what we mean by that.
Thank you, Chris. So here we're going to take a look at a couple maps that show the total inventory within a 5-mile radius or 15-minute commute of downtown. And this is for projects with 50 or more units. What we'll see is 90% of the projects within this 5-mile radius are within a 1/4 mile of a bus stop or a light rail stop, and so can commute to downtown via 1 or 2 bus stops or a bus stop and light rail stop. So here we see all the market rate apartments. These are all the workforce, affordable, and public housing. So going back to the bar graph from earlier. A significant portion of the total units that we see within a 5-mile radius are workforce and affordable. Workforce and affordable make up about 60% of all the units that we see within a 5-mile radius.
So now we'll kind of give you an overview of what we see as some missed opportunities. So as you'll remember, about 168,000 people are employed in the central city with $10.7 billion in annual payroll. 52% live outside the city of Phoenix. If we did an analysis to look at what if 2%, just 2% of those moved back into Phoenix, we would see an ongoing direct tax revenue to benefit Phoenix of $1.4 million annually. That's not including construction sales tax, that's including ongoing sales tax. It represents approximately 4 to 5 projects a year. This also represents about 1,700 people moving back into the central city. Just like people commuted to the suburbs for single-family residential, they've commuted to the suburbs for high-density residential as well. So we look at our opportunities that exist here. Payroll is leaving the city due to lack of available options that exist today. Just kind of in a comparison as we think about going to the suburbs and developers building projects in the suburbs, you'd see typically a 300-unit project would build on 18 acres. They would surface park. You'd see that project come in somewhere $25 to $30 million. They have most of the infrastructure around them. Streets are in a built system. It's a greenfield development option. When we look at the downtown and the central city market, it's a much more complex and complicated and expensive development, quite frankly. You've got a land cost of some of the highest in the entire valley, but even if you set that land cost aside, because that's a one-time cost, so you set that land cost aside and you look at what our general plan asks for. It is density, it's urban scale development, it is structured parking. So you look at if you're subterranean parking, you're at $25,000 to $50,000 a stall, depending on what you find once you put a shovel in the ground, or you're $12,000 to $15,000 a stall if you're going in structured parking. And you know that you can count that back at $50 to $70 a month in your rent. It takes development a long time to recoup that structured parking cost. And when you look at the development, they're building on 14,000 square foot lots. They're building on an acre. They're building on an acre and a half. So it's very dense, complex development that happens here and much more expensive development as we look at our opportunities to move forward. As we look at bringing new high-density residential into the market, it really does accomplish that goal of the general plan has of the policy to live where you work and to be able to create those opportunities. What we do see, though, that is critically important is what we've talked about so far is market demand, what our employees are looking for in the market. But all of our citizens deserve a good housing opportunity. All of our citizens deserve a great place to live. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Cindy Stotler to talk to you a little bit more about the affordable housing options that we see in the Central City.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. So probably like you were during this presentation, I was surprised to see the percentages of affordable versus market rate in the downtown and in the central city. But we have to remember that that's skewed because during the recession, as Chris said, the only thing being built was affordable. So now that urban development is so hot and people want to live downtown, we're seeing that resurgence of market rate housing come in, and you're all seeing it. So what I want to talk about is that we can't lose sight that of the fact that there's still almost 100,000 low-income individuals out there that need housing assistance, according to our consolidated plan in the city, 100,000. And that number is expected to grow by 7.5% in the next 5 years. So we still have a great need out there for affordable housing. Even though it appears that there's a lot built, we still have a lot more to go. And what we need to do with affordable housing is to make sure that we locate it strategically. The housing department's very aware of the needs of our residents that live in affordable housing. They need to be near transportation corridors. They need to be near job centers. They need to be near amenities like grocery stores and schools and parks and things that everybody needs. But our residents in particular don't have vehicles and don't have high-paying jobs and things like that, so they need things nearby. So what we're going to do in the housing department is look at the 18 affordable properties that we own, and we're lucky in the fact that many of them are located in the key strategic areas that people want to live. We have 3 in the downtown. We have about 5 along the light rail in the central city. Of course, we'd want to acquire more, and we'll look at doing that as we redevelop and acquire funds. We would look at acquiring more along the light rail, but we want to make sure our residents have the same opportunity as the up-and-comers that all want to live around the light rail. And as the property values grow in the downtown and along the light rail, we have a unique opportunity as landowners in those areas to use the land and make sure that we use it to the highest and best use and house the most people that we can in the affordable housing areas that we can establish. So that's our goal, is to focus on redeveloping our 18, those of the 18 that are strategically located in areas that would be beneficial, to grow the number of affordable units and also locate folks in affordable units in desirable areas like downtown and like along the light rail.
So, kind of in conclusion, as you can see, we need an opportunity to provide good housing opportunities for all of our citizens in a diverse geographic area. We need to work to drive more of our disposable income here in Phoenix, which will assist us, of course, in streets and parks and fire and police and all of the city services that our citizens are interested in. We've given you a lot of information here. We have a lot of work still to do. I wanted to give you just an update on where we're at. Joseph and I are still working on additional data. We think we'd like to move now outside the central city and kind of go mountain to mountain, I-17 to 52nd Street, really take the whole swath of the central city. Come back to you in the fall at one of your early meetings and talk to you about some ideas and some potential options that we would propose that council consider for moving forward in our strategy for high-density residential. And with that, we'd be happy to take any questions you might have.
Wonderful, thank you. Councilman DeCiccio.
I've got a couple. Really fascinating study and well done. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
For putting this together. It is interesting. Does this also include the housing competitive queue at all?
It does. So if we go back to, let me get you back here real quickly. If we go back to this particular slide, what we did is we took everything in the central city that was under construction and assumed it was built.
Okay.
And that's what we added into what you see here today.
So this is a cumulative number.
Yes, sir.
It's not just what's already purchased.
Yes,
or
sir.
what's out there. Now, from my understanding and talking into at least the Class A operators, they seem to think that there's a saturation point that's already reached in the downtown core, that we may not see much more coming in. I don't know if that's true or not. At least that's just kind of a feeling that's occurring. Or there might be a point where, because of the land values and the cost of construction and everything else has just gone up quite a bit, that they think that there might be some downward pressure on the units when it comes to the rents that they're going to be able to get out of that. So we'll have to wait and see on that. And I think what you're talking about, maybe that's a Cindy question too. You're talking about looking at the lands that we own right now and finding a way to put that into production, into the hands of the private sector, or we keep it, or how does that work? My preference is always to get it out of our hands.
Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee, that is actually the subject of the next item on the agenda. Is one of the properties I intend to do just that.
Okay.
Is look for redevelopment opportunities of land that we own.
Okay. And so when we're looking at this then too, the 2% doesn't seem like, it's only about 3,700 more people moving into the downtown area. Is that correct?
On the 2%, it's about 1,700 more people
1,700.
moving into the downtown market.
Okay. And then when we're looking at the type of housing, obviously there's different types of housing that these individuals like to get into. It may not necessarily be the apartment life kind of style, it may be a row house or something like that. How are we making that determination of what to look at? Or is that just mostly going to be market driven? How do we do that?
Madam Chairwoman,
I'm just
Councilman
curious, yeah.
DeCiccio, it is typically what we're going after as we're looking at housing opportunities to drive development to in the central city is that broad range that you're talking about. Right here in the downtown market, you see the high rises, you see the land's the most expensive, it's where we have the density, it's what happens. When you look up along Central, kind of north of McDowell, or step outside the threes, you will see product coming more online that's townhouses, that's row houses, that's condos, that is, they may be multifamily opportunities, but maybe it's more in less of an urban scale and more of options. We want to make sure that all of the citizens even employed citizens that want different opportunities to live, and the market, as you so well put, is that if there's downward pressure on the rents on the bigger projects, they'll start to look at other avenues to success in that market. And we are hearing from a number of developers who are interested in identifying sites for townhouses and for row houses to provide that wide range of options.
Yeah, and I think that that's a good market right now for people to get into. It's just the cost of land. They need the density, but that cost of land will come down once people realize they can't get the densities anymore. You know, it'll just come down just naturally through the market. Interesting. Okay, well done. Looks good.
Thank you very much for this very interesting update. I think it's very timely as our peer cities across the country are talking about how they have no affordable housing in their downtown, how in many cities it's a huge challenge that you don't have the full spectrum of people who work in your downtown being able to live anywhere near downtown. And so I think it's a real strategic advantage that we have housing levels across the spectrum in our downtown, that you can live in affordable housing in downtown Phoenix. Even across our city, I think if you look at the different home builder affordability indexes, we have a much higher percentage of the people who work in our community who can afford to live in our community than other cities of our size. And
Madam Chair, we were actually able to, at your suggestion, we were able to gather some information on peer cities of our size. And of a study we found in the governing magazine, Phoenix was 178th, and where we normally don't like to be low on the scale, in this instance, we wanted to be low on the scale. So they took 302 cities for their affordability, meaning what of their existing population could afford 30% of their, what housing options were available at 30% of the wage of the existing population. And Phoenix, I'm happy to say, was at 178th. Normally, I'd want to be at the top of every list, but we were in a significantly better shape than quite a number of our peer cities. And even those that we compete with pretty readily, we were within 0.5% or 1% one way or the other of those cities. So I'd say, exactly to your point, and looking at a national comparison, we're in a very good position on affordability.
it's, Councilman Valenzuela and I are both very interested in the innovation district we're working on in downtown and the ability to have, because there's research that shows that if you have people who can work, live, and play all in the same area, that really spurs innovation, and that you can afford as an entrepreneur who's bootstrapping to live near that innovation district. And I think that's good news. We certainly saw the New York Times, the cover story in their Nation section on Sunday was talking about that you can do just that. This is an affordable place to pursue your dreams, and that there's the infrastructure to help that. It's actually very timely while we're getting national attention for betting on our downtown to have this update. So I think even further data, they probably would have benefited from having at the New York Times. But I really think it is a strategic advantage that we ought to keep talking about. We're certainly not done yet, as Ms. Stotler pointed out. There's still a lot of people who need housing options, but when you look at our peers, they don't have this story to be able to tell. And we, compared to other peers, have a much higher percentage of affordable housing. Certainly not perfect, but a good story that we ought to be telling. And if we look at what we as policymakers should be doing next as a result of this, I mean, it really does seem like there's a huge workforce that we could capture just a small percent. I think we can be more ambitious than 2%.
I say 10.
But I think that is legitimately realistic, and we're seeing a lot of research saying that people at multiple different points in their life want the urban amenities. They want to be, it's not just students who want to be near a university, but also many individuals who are retired who love the culture and the education and some of the amenities that we have in our downtown. And if we can also tell the story that you can have all that and it's affordable, so much the better.
We have great options here in our downtown. That was evident of going through this study with Joseph and Cindy and I.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Any other questions?
Yeah, just a comment. I want to say thank you. It's all relative. I think we realize that, you know, people are coming, millennials, like my colleague here, generally speaking, as a generation, are choosing location over job even, right? And today's workforce allows you, or the industries that are driving our economy forward allow us to do that. And people are choosing downtown because of the vision and the overall investment and continuing to invest in downtown and think of everyone. We're thinking of everyone. You see several generations of people when you when you go to any one of our museums, as an example. And they're not here just for a ball game either. I mean, they're here, they want to live here. We have the grocery store coming in, and things will continue to move forward. I want to give you credit, Councilwoman Gallego, especially around the housing. This is important for all of us, but specifically housing in downtown Phoenix is something that you've been talking about since you joined the council as well. And I think it's really helping to to move our economy forward and frankly the community at large forward as well. So onward, we're on to something here.
Thank you. It really is exciting. So I moved here from Boston, and we bought our first home at 7th and Washington a few years after I graduated, and it was wonderful to tell my peers who had moved to New York City what we paid to live downtown, right next to, 2 James Beard Award-winning restaurants, multiple theater venues, multiple sports venues. I mean, people living in downtown Manhattan are paying 5 times what people are paying in downtown Phoenix for a much smaller piece of property. There's, if you look at what people are paying in downtown San Francisco, it's many multiples of what people are paying in our downtown, and we have just as great a food, culture, and sports. Well, maybe not just as great a food. Well, no, we'll go with just as great a food.
Madam Chair, I was just in San Francisco recruiting companies 2 weeks ago, and I met with one of our existing employers in the downtown market. They are having trouble just keeping their workforce because the average rent has gone over $10,000 for an apartment, and are really struggling to have their workforce that doesn't have to commute greater than 2 hours each day coming in and out of the city. That's what they shared with us.
And if your rent is $10,000, you can't afford to take the kind of risks that you can take in Phoenix. It's a great story for us. More work to be done, but I think great to have this update, and I, for one, would look forward to the larger scale update.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think do not have any cards on this item, so we'll move on to item number 6, and Cindy Stotler is earning her
Leaving the
paycheck
table.
today.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. I'm going to introduce our Deputy Director, Angela Duncan. She's the Deputy Director over Development. I apologize for not introducing her before. She will join me for this presentation. So the previous presentation was an excellent lead-in to the subject I want to talk about today, which is opportunity for redevelopment of Deck Park Vista. Deck Park Vista is a 56-unit garden-style, 2-story garden-style apartment complex built in 1992 at 3rd Street and Moreland in the downtown. It's right in the middle of Roosevelt Row, Evans Churchill neighborhood. Because it was built in 92, we didn't have a downtown, we didn't have a walkable urban code, we didn't have a downtown code. It's built as a suburban development with walls and no shade and no walkability. And it's an extreme underutilization of the 2.1 acres right in the heart of downtown. So what we'd like to do is look at redeveloping and providing the opportunity for a mix of affordable and workforce housing. What we're hearing from the residents of this area, Roosevelt Row, Evans Churchill, Downtown Voices, all the folks that are active in our neighborhoods in the downtown, is that they feel are being priced out with all the new residential units that are going in. And as Chris Mackey had said, as the prices go up for a property and it's very expensive to develop high-rise, and it's very expensive to have the underground parking, so you have to charge a certain amount of rent in order for those projects to pencil out. We have the unique opportunity in the housing department to use properties that we already own, because we don't have to buy these properties that are of a high land value now because of the resurgence of downtown. We can afford to build affordable and workforce housing. So what we're looking at is a new multifamily development that provides affordable and many more units than what can be provided today. So I said there's 56 units. We have downtown code zoning. We could do over 400 units, possibly. Not sure that's appropriate or pencil out for affordables, but we could certainly get many, many more units than we have today. So we're looking at a multifamily development that it provides more affordable housing than today, provides workforce housing as well, and then also is compatible with the downtown code and the style of urban development we want to see today with street level activities, shade and walkability, and all the things we're looking for in development. So what we'd like to propose is we'd like to work over the summer with the neighborhoods I spoke about, Evans, Churchill, Roosevelt Row, and Downtown Voices. I have meetings with those folks coming up. I'd like to work with them over the summer to talk about what kind of development they'd like to see and what's desired by the residents, and come back in the fall with a request for proposal to come out. We're looking, as I said, for a combination of affordable and workforce units. And what I mean by workforce units is they would not be subject to affordable stipulations. They would just be a low rent unit. Because when you build an affordable complex, you don't put the amenities in that you put in for a high market rate complex. So we can afford to provide a lower market rate rent. So those folks that feel like maybe they're artists or they're other people that work in the downtown, at the convention center, at the hotels and things like that, they feel like they're being priced out. They could actually afford these workforce or affordable units in this area. We have 56 units existing now. It's a senior property. We have many opportunities for these residents to relocate. We have 13 senior properties with over 1,100 units that are owned by the City Housing Department. And what we've done is we had a resident meeting last week on the June 16th. About 30 of the residents came, and they asked a lot of questions, and we had a lot of answers for them. We will continue to work with them, but we will relocate them at the city's expense. We'll pay their moving expenses. We offer to prioritize them in any one of the 13 properties that we own, so they would not have to go on a waiting list. They could get into whichever property they like. And then they can also come back. And we offer to prioritize their return and work with the developer when it returns. And I think I failed to mention that we're looking to sell this property to a private developer for private development, put a 40-year land use restriction on it, and pull some money out. So that's really the deal that we're looking at here. So it would be in the hands of a private developer, but it would be a 40-year land use restriction on it so that it would remain affordable for 40 years. So going back, we would work with the developer to prioritize any residents that wanted to come back and live in the downtown and live in that new area. We promise to do ongoing communication with them. We promise to meet with them at least every 2 months or more often if they desire. They can ask questions at any time. We work very closely with the property manager there who reports to us. We are right now researching some of the things that they had asked us about all the 13 properties that we own. They asked us about amenities in those properties such as cable TV and covered parking, gated parking, and other things that they were looking at as equivalent to where they are now. So we're amassing a list of all those 13 properties with the amenities for each property so they have the ability to decide which suits them better. Some of them are just as expensive as the one they're living now, and some of them, if they choose to go to public housing, they would actually pay less rent, and some of them were excited about that. So there's a lot of things to consider when you're considering where to move. In addition to the ongoing communication with the residents during this process, I am committed to continuing and working with the neighborhood and community groups. Like I said, I'm going to work with them this summer in order to develop the conditions that we're going to put into the RFP for what they're looking for in the development. And then we will also require the developer to work with us and the neighborhood groups as the development proceeds to make sure that it's not disruptive to the neighborhood and it results in the thing that we were all looking for, the kind of development we were all looking for. We think that this is a fabulous opportunity to take property that we already own, 2.1 acres in a prime residential area that's almost, I think in the future is going to be the most dense residential area that we have in the downtown, and convert it to additional affordable and workforce housing that is so in demand in the downtown area.
Fabulous. Thank you. Appreciate the Housing Department's commitment to ongoing communication. This is a big deal to a lot of people, and we need to make sure people understand, we get the feedback that we need to do it right and have a win for our community. So thank you on that. Councilwoman Pastor.
I have several questions about this, and mainly of the fact that we would be moving seniors out of this area and placing them in other areas where I would think we would want a mixed use of seniors or multi-generational people living within our downtown area and being able to participate with the amenities that the downtown offers, such as light rail, such as walking down to eateries, restaurants, activities that happen within the park. So I'm just cautious or being very deliberative about this because, and in the sense of watching out for our seniors. The other piece I have is we talk about affordable and workforce. What's the difference between affordable and workforce?
So, Madam Chair and Councilwoman Pastor, first I'll address the concern about the seniors. Um, by no means are we excluding seniors from moving back into this property. What we're looking at, though, is an urban development with street-level activity that is not consistent with our general development of senior properties. When we develop senior properties, they are walled in, key carded, so that there's a lot of security for our seniors because that's what they want. However, if these seniors want to come back and live, we will work with the developer to prioritize them to come back and live in the downtown. Many of them, you know, our senior properties are 55 and older. 55 is not old. As closer I get to that, the more I think it's not old. So there's many of them that will want to come back and live in this walkable urban environment, and we're happy to provide the opportunity for them to come back. So this is not an exclusive development that excludes seniors in any way. They're welcome to come back and live in this development.
Okay, but will it be affordable or workforce? What's the difference between affordable and workforce, and what is it currently? Is it an affordable housing or workforce? I mean,
Yes, ma'am.
That's
So it is affordable currently,
okay,
and the units that they would go into would be affordable as well. Those are rent-restricted units. Affordable units are rent-restricted. Market rate workforce is just a market rate, but it's a lower market rate than the high-end prices they're charging at the new developments that you're seeing. So when we talk about workforce, it's something that's affordable for people who are in the working community, but it's still set by the market. But as I said, the way we develop affordables, we develop with fewer amenities than they do in those high ends, and we own the land, so we don't have to add that cost of the land into the rents. So the rents, market rate rents for workforce will be affordable.
okay. And when you say we own the land, what I had heard just previously, so I needed some clarity, is my understanding is, are we selling the land to a private developer?
Yeah, so
Okay.
we're selling the land, but we are selling it with, what we're going to get in return is affordable housing
Correct.
units and then some cash. So we're not going to sell it at market rate for cash and then have them to make them develop affordable housing on top of that. So we'll do a mix of affordable housing and cash because they're going to get a lot of rent out of the workforce housing. So with that added rent and sustainability for the property, they're going to be able to give us some cash back for the property. If it was going to be all affordable, we wouldn't get any cash out of the deal. It would just all go to affordable development. But even the way we're structuring it now, they're going to be able to build affordable units because we are not charging market rate for the land.
Then what happens after 40 years?
After 40 years, it depends. It's hard to say what happens after 40 years.
What happens after 40 years? Does that development stay with that developer? We no longer have workforce or affordable housing after 40 years. That's
Possibly,
my understanding
yes.
of the contract or the RFP or the swap.
It could possibly go to market rate at that point.
Okay. So then in 40 years, I'm just looking at an old city like Chicago, New York, even LA. We could be at a point where in 40 years, we could be a Chicago or an LA and not have any affordability. I'm just asking. I mean, that's what reality is. I just want to get it clear so people understand what's happening and what's happening now, how it's going to affect the future and the future from that. So that's where I'm because then in 40 years we will be like those old cities because we will be an old city, not as and we're a young city, so we're building right now. So that's why I'm asking questions to be cognizant of how we're going to build now and how it will affect for the future. And that's kind of why I'm asking the questions, because I'm thinking as you're talking, okay, wait, this is the domino effect of several things. And so that's kind of, I think the public should know that and understand that. The other piece is with the affordable, what I understand, it will be affordable workforce and then market. It will be a mixed.
So Councilwoman Pastor, it will be affordable with maximum rent limits set on it, and then market rate workforce.
Okay.
So market rate workforce is a lower market rate than what's being currently built in the downtown.
Okay, so that is where several of my friends that live into the downtown right now and have been calling me and telling me, you're going to market, you're going to price this out. We need some, well, they use the term affordability, but it's really more workforce.
Yes.
Okay, got it. Just want to be clear. Thank you.
Fabulous. And it sounds like we're going to do a lot more community engagement, so not moving forward today. But one of the things I have heard on this is that individuals in the community would love to see the affordable units look the same as the units that don't have as many restrictions. And that is something we've done with success in this community before, but some other cities have not done. And
Madam Chair, we have every intention of making this look like any other market rate development, and that is the reason for working with the community to see what they want to see, what they want to have there regarding the street level activity. We want to make it look like any other urban development going on in the downtown, so it doesn't stand out and say affordable. That is our intent.
But within the development, an affordable unit would look the same as a unit that didn't have any.
Yes, Madam Chair, the affordable units will be indistinguishable from the market rate units. It will just be a designation of the number of units that are set aside for affordability and the number of units that are set aside for workforce.
Fabulous. And we've heard a lot that the downtown already has so many amenities, you don't have to put them all in the building, that the downtown is one of the amenities that makes this so attractive. And I think if we do move forward with this, people who live there will want to be back in that downtown, so we could also help them with transportation passes or other things to make sure they stay connected to their community. Great. Councilman DeCiccio.
Just a couple questions on that, and just want to make sure that I understand the difference between the affordable and market-driven or the workforce. I think the focus really needs to be strongly on workforce. You know, if you're looking to create jobs moving into the city of Phoenix, into the downtown core, the workforce is critical. You have to do that. Yeah, but my understanding from what the description was just now was that on the affordable side of it, we can designate the amount of units that we expect to have out of that project, and that those rents are basically stabilized or controlled over the next 40 years. But on workforce, the only thing that we can do is look at the amenities that are there, and then that drives the price. But the price could really move up faster if there isn't enough workforce development housing in that area. So it really can fluctuate with the market. It's going to be basically amenity driven. Is there another way to do that that ensures the workforce development without, not the guy who wants to have government controls on things, but is there a way to do that that is more secure long term? Because if you look at what the housing costs are right now in the downtown area, I don't see how they stabilize, and I think the pricing is still going to continue to go up only until you get an oversupply, and I don't think we're at the oversupply point yet. How is it going to happen? I just don't want us to be surprised 3 years from now and say, well, wow, wait a second, these rents are a lot higher.
So, Madam Chair, Councilman DeCiccio, of course, there are ways to ensure that with land use restrictions. We could add that to the contract and make it part of the RFP. The only thing I worry about is that the developer may not be able to get a loan, actually, and show that the property is sustainable in the long run. That is part of their loan requirements. So what we were trying to do is work with them to ensure that they do a minimum amount of amenities and make sure that it is not going to compete with the high-end market rate units that are going on, so it remains a workforce affordable unit. But we can go back and brainstorm. We have some time. We have the summer to talk to the neighborhoods and things, and we can brainstorm on other ways that maybe we can ensure without affecting the financial viability of the project, but maybe putting some kind of restrictions or wording into the contract with the developer.
Just something else, I don't know how that works, because I know they do things like that in San Francisco, and what ends up happening under those rent-controlled apartment units, they really aren't, I mean, they're affordable, but then they're not for those individuals that were designated to be in there, in that marketplace. So I think over time that's probably the bigger issue that you're going to run into, and other than an escalation in pricing, but that's not going to drop until you have an oversupply. That just won't happen. Maybe one of the things you ought to look at, though, too, is when you put these out, only because I think they're going to be in high demand, is that one of the concerns neighbors generally have is that, Whether it's true or not, I don't know. Maybe it's just a myth. But that individuals that live in affordable housing are less protective of their area than others would be because it's an affordable housing. So I think that if you look at some of the restrictions that could be placed on that, on those individuals to make sure that they comply with, if you get too many calls on police calls in an area that they might not be able to get in there. And I think that's done with Section 8 housing, which I don't think people realize. I think with Section 8 housing that the individuals have some pretty strict controls that if they end up becoming problems in that area, they may not get those vouchers anymore. And that's kind of like what we have here when we're talking about affordable housing. It becomes basically a type of voucher in that area. It's no different than that, really. It's interesting.
So Councilman, with most of our home loans right now that we give out, the home loans and the CDBG loans I was talking about before, we put in the contract the requirement to be a crime-free multi-housing property, phase 2 and 3, certified crime-free, and they have to have annual meetings. We require their property manager to keep the property up to certain standards in the contract. I think we can write that in to this RFP to maintain the property as well in this downtown development.
Yeah, we did a study in my district, just for the others to know too, that wanted to look at some of the Section 8 housing, what was happening with it. And by far, they were probably, some of the individuals were the ones that were most responsible. They had the fewest calls, which I was surprised at. I mean, because at the end of the day, you always think that it could be the other way around. And it was just something that we found, at least in one area in my district, because I wanted to take a look at that. Because a lot of the citizens were looking, that's why I asked for where the affordable housing was in my district too. I want to take a look at that and see, really what are the types of calls we're getting out of those areas. I mean, are they problems or not? And then what kind of restrictions do they have? And that's what we found out too, that the amount of restrictions on individuals, that if they become problems in those areas, they get booted out and they lose those vouchers. And that's a pretty big incentive for them not to do that.
Yes.
But again, going back to this, I think that at the end of the day, until you create a supply, problem or advantage, you're not going to see. I think that even on these market-driven housing projects, or we call them market-driven, at the end of the day, I don't think the amenities are going to matter as much because they're going to get it in the surrounding areas. But it's the amount of supply that you're going to have to put out there in order to keep those prices stabilized. I mean, that's one of the issues they have in San Francisco. There's only a certain amount of supply, but an amazing amount of people that want to live there. All right, that's it. Thanks.
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, might I suggest, given the great dialogue and some of the things that you all are asking Housing Department to consider, that Housing Department work over the summer and we could bring back to you in the fall additional information on the request for proposal before we actually move forward to issue.
I think that's a responsible decision. So we do not need a vote then. Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we have quite the full agenda. I have cards on most items, but I do not have any cards on item number 8, which is authorization to enter into contract for sale of 2nd, 3rd Avenue McKinley parcels. I think this is an area of our downtown which my colleagues are very familiar with. So if anyone in the audience would like to fill out a card for that, that would be great. Otherwise, I would ask if we could not have a presentation on that item. All right. So we would need a motion on item 8.
Motion to approve item 8.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. So item 8 passes unanimously. Congratulations to the successful proposal. We will see you at the full meeting of the Phoenix City Council. And then we'll move to item number 7, Central and Columbus Avenue property request for proposals. Our Housing Director, Cindy Stotler, gets to keep her seat, and we will welcome back Christine Mackey from Community and Economic Development and Jeff Stapleton from Community and Economic Development.
Good morning again. We are here today to talk to you about the potential request for proposal issuance for a city-owned property at Central and Columbus. It's on the east side of Central, bounded by Weldon and Columbus. They give you a full presentation on what staff would propose for council consideration of the issuance of an RFP. I'll turn it over to Jeff Stapleton to walk you through the project. Jeff?
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, Before I get into the specific RFP opportunity for the site at Central and Columbus, I just want to touch on some of the great momentum that we're having in Midtown. Midtown has had great success in attracting both companies and entrepreneurs. Just some of them are listed up there on the screen: BMO Harris, Banner Health, Kahoot, SeedSpot, Facility Source. The department also is looking to recruit more tech and healthcare companies to locate in Midtown. We're looking at companies that are more used to a dense urban environment like we're trying to build in Midtown. And we're also attracting residents to Midtown. Two prominent developments such as Midtown, Edison Midtown, and Alta Thomas are currently under construction. And thanks to all the great community involvement as part of Reinvent Phoenix, we have a guiding document with the Midtown TOD policy plan that gives us direction for how to encourage more TOD development along the light rail corridor in Midtown. You'll see the star there in that Reinvent Phoenix planning map is where our site is located, the city-owned parcel. And so it is generally north of Osborne Road, south of Indian School, and just east of Central. So a little more information about the site. So you'll see that the site, the current map of the site is right there in the bottom right from 2016. It's 3.4 acres of city-owned land, and you were just talking about the momentum in Midtown. Here we have vacant land. No momentum with vacant land. No revenue, blight. This is a great opportunity to get this piece of city-owned land developed. You can see the progression of the land over the years. So in the upper left corner is the site back from the mid-20th century, mostly detached single-family homes. As the decades wore on, the surrounding development became more commercial. So we're talking about 1, 2, 3-story commercial buildings surrounding the site. Of course, some high-rise commercial along Central. By the 1990s, the site was mostly vacant. And then in the bottom left is a picture of a map of the site from 2006 before the housing department acquired the site in 2007. The site, despite being vacant, has great attributes. It is a quarter mile from Steele Indian School Park, a half mile from St. Joseph's and Park Central. And it is also within a 1 mile radius of this location is 30,000 jobs. Some goals of this RFP. We are looking to have the property conform to the Reinvent Phoenix zoning guidance that's from the Midtown TOD policy plan, which is going to encourage transit-oriented development. This is going to be part of the Transect T57 zoning, which calls for about a minimum building height of about 56 feet up to a maximum of 100 feet. Since this site is owned by the housing department, we see an opportunity to ask for some affordable housing units to be part of the proposals. And last, we're looking to break up the super block that is formed from Central to 3rd Street and from Weldon to Columbus. So if fully developed, the pedestrian access in that area would be very, very poor. The Reinvent Phoenix and the Midtown TOD policy plan calls for making that block more permeable and to be able to establish access for pedestrians throughout the property. You'll see here the recommended evaluation criteria for this RFP. I will note on the third one for financial return, we are looking for proposers to submit to us a cash value plus the value of affordable housing units that will equal a total value. That total value must exceed the appraised value of the property. The property was appraised in 2014 at $3.5 million. There is a current appraisal that is underway right now, and we're hoping to capture the additional value of the land via the appraisal. The timeline for this RFP, last week staff attended the Midtown Neighborhood Association. We gave them a presentation similar to the one you're receiving today and asked for them for their feedback and input. The feedback was very positive. Of course, we're looking to develop a vacant lot, so there was excitement about that prospect, and you'll see that we're here before you today to ask for your recommendation to the full council. We are then, after getting that authority, we are looking to issue the RFP next month. That would put us in a position to have proposals due by September, and then we would be back before you in October, November, later this year with a recommended proposer and a set of business terms. And with that, staff requests the Neighborhood Housing and Development Subcommittee's recommendation to the full City Council to issue a request for proposal for the disposition of city-owned land on Columbus Avenue, just east of Central Avenue. Any questions?
Fabulous, thank you. We do have one card on this agenda item from Anna Darian, marked neutral.
So yes, Anna Darian, some of you may know me from the city of Phoenix, where I was employed as of about a month ago. I'm currently representing LISC Phoenix. And we are a community development financial institution. Most of you know us for our work around the transit lines. We focus primarily on sort of affordable housing historically, but we're definitely moving into a lot more areas of economic development, again, looking out for community development projects. So we are excited about this project. We are taking a neutral position on this. I think it's great that this site, many eyes have been on it for a very long time to see some project going in, and we're excited to see this come through. However, we would like to make a position with regard to the affordability of it. This was a site that was earmarked for many years as a site that was going to be an affordable housing project. I think that while I very much appreciate the study that shows where we are at today with affordable housing, I think our concern right now is where we're going with this, and where we've seen in cities that you've mentioned across the country, where we've seen that without a check on housing, the private sector will continue to do as much of a market rate of housing as it sees fit. So we'd really like to look at these sites that the city has acquired as an opportunity for us to kind of get ahead of the game a little bit and seize this moment that we're in. So some of the things that we think about when we're looking at the council report on this site is the number of affordable units. We see that there's a cap or a minimum that's about 35 units. Ideally, we would have wanted 100%. I understand this is a mixed income project, and we respect that. But I think seeing that come up a little bit, perhaps to maybe 50%. Also, the idea of mixed income development is pretty new for Phoenix. I'm not sure if we've got the development capacity in the valley to do this type of project. So we'd want to make sure that whoever is the winning proposer, as part of their qualifications, that they have a proven track record in affordable housing, or partner officially with someone that does have that background. And then lastly, with regard to the timing, I see that there's a lot of emphasis on timely development. Again, respecting that we are in a sort of housing a trend right now. We want to seize that. But some of these projects that come in for affordable housing, they've got timelines that they have to work with when they're applying for the tax credits. This can be a multi-year project. So we'd really like to see some buffer allowing for our traditional affordable housing developers to have a chance at this as well. This could be phased, market rate could be at the front end, but we're looking at a multi-year process to make it viable for those developers. So that's all I have for you today.
Councilwoman Pastor.
So this is coming to council on this Friday or next Friday?
July 1st.
July 1st, in
Yes,
order
ma'am.
for it to then be an RFP be written? Because my understanding is draft RFP, and then we're planning on September to issue it?
Through the chairwoman, Councilwoman Pastor, our timeline that we're on right now, and we had some capacity within our team. So our goal is, we've been drafting the RFP now. We'd like to issue the RFP in July and actually have it due in September.
That's not what's being presented right here, what I'm reading. And so,
I apologize, that's an incorrect slide. That's not what I apologize, the incorrect presentation went to, I have a full copy here that shows.
I want to stick with this timeline.
So Chairwoman Gallego, Councilwoman Pastor, is it your desire that this particular item be similar to the previous one, which is working over the summer months to develop the RFP and coming back to subcommittee in the fall?
Yes.
That work?
Yes, yes. I just think that these are coming to us. We're going off on break. Things are going to happen over break, and then it's going to be released, and we don't have a chance to really catch up with what's happening. So,
I would defer to CED just to ensure that what that will mean is we will work over the summer months to develop the RFP similar to Park Deck. We would be coming back to subcommittee in the fall with the RFP and then moving forward at that point.
which
September,
would be September.
right.
So we're still on the same timeline. Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you for bringing this forward. I think it's an exciting opportunity in a very, very hot neighborhood, and it'll be exciting to have one of the first city projects in the Midtown Reinvent District. We saw a lot of enthusiasm for the Reinvent. I think I saw Councilman Pastor get thunderous applause talking about some of the principles of Reinvent in the Midtown area, including shaded walkable corridors, and so it's exciting that we'll be able to be involved with that. We did hear a lot from the community that they wanted a walkable scale, so breaking up the super block was something that I think that's what we heard most about so far. But it will be, it's a great, exciting area, and there's been a fair amount of housing already built, including several affordable projects in the area, and it sounds like we have some of those folks on our team to help look at it. And I hope that when we do move forward, the evaluation includes people who are familiar with the Reinvent process and the Walkable Urban Code, because there's such enthusiasm in the Midtown area for that project, and so that we can make sure we implement it well. With that, does anyone else, Councilman DeCiccio?
Just a quick one though, too, on the timing in your district from, oh. I'll
Councilwoman
support
Pastor's
whatever
district.
the timing that the councilwoman wants on that, but is there a financial or a strategic reason? I would imagine that there is on a timeline like that. That could be.
Through the chairwoman, Councilman DeCiccio, staff had worked on this with the proposal issuing in July and coming back to council at their September meeting. What our plan had been was to get it out into the market while we're still seeing some strong activity, where we're still seeing the best return for the city on its prices before, as we talked about, and you mentioned in the original proposal, was before we see land values start to turn down again. We know that we have a cycle we want to capture before the cycle closes, and as we know from the downturn in 2007, it can happen over Thanksgiving weekend. And so our goal was simply to get it issued and bring it back with the highest value potential for the city. So that was our reason for wanting to get it out before the cycle changes.
And just, then this is kind of what's happening too in the marketplace throughout. People are really trying to get their product in line right now in order to capture those values. So, I mean, I'll support whatever the councilwoman wants to do on that. That's her district on it, but it's just something to think about.
Do we expect this to be a tax credit project, and will you walk us through the timing for the state tax credits?
Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee, we have no idea if this is going to be a tax credit project or not. So that's why we set a minimum, a very low minimum of 35. I appreciate the concerns from Liz because we have the same concerns. Would like to see the most affordable units we can. We also want to make sure that we see affordable units mixed in the same development as a market rate development so that the affordable units are indistinguishable from the market rate. Excuse me, that was one of our biggest concerns, was that it be exactly the same. So our thought was it would be developed at the same time as the market rate units instead of separately through a LIHTC. But if this does go through a LIHTC, the sooner the better, because they would have to be ready with their applications. I think it's in February or March. We have to get our loans out by February so that they can include our loans in their competition process for the state in March. So just the sooner the better, always for the developers, if we want to develop quickly. If we put it off and we don't issue until December, then we're looking at the next year for LIHTC, so we'd have to wait another year.
Great, thank you. And I am not saying it needs to be whatever financing the market comes for, we'll react to. I love diverse projects. I think the healthiest neighborhoods are the most diverse ones, and so to me, a mix does make sense. But
And Vice Mayor Gallego, members of the subcommittee, I do believe we have the time over the summer to work with CED and the Housing Department and bring forward the information in the fall, in September. We'll make sure that we put both of those on the September subcommittee agenda.
and it's very possible we'll have a switch in subcommittees, so we may not all, the four of us may not. I hear we have a new council member with some experience in the jurisdiction of this particular subcommittee.
Which usually means I get booted. I get bounced around from subcommittee because there's always a concern that I'm going to ask too many questions on some of these subcommittees. So I'm sure I'll get booted to another subcommittee where it's one of those that nobody does anything on it. So we'll find out which one I get on.
know that.
Well,
There's got to be one out there.
Tell me what that subcommittee is.
I don't know. We'll find it.
moving on to, speaking of popularity of Reinvent Phoenix, moving on to a series of items related to Reinvent Phoenix, the East Lake Garfield character area, and walkable urban code. So items 9 through 11 will be one presentation.
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, this morning I have with me Sandy Hoffman and Craig Mavis to present these three items together and ask for separate actions, as you noted. I'm proud to sit here before you in recognition of the previous items that have gone on that were linked back to our general plan update that was approved by the voters and supported by 71% of those voters, I believe, during the last election, as well as our Reinvent Phoenix process. And so you see coming before you are these three items that are helping implement the Reinvent Phoenix plan, which also garnered tremendous support via the public. And so it's great to see all these other city departments working to help implement the plans that we create with the public. So today here, these three items, we're here to talk about the East Lake Garfield area. So they're all in District 8. They're all part of our East Lake Garfield Transit District. They are three different items. So the first one is a general plan amendment. The second one is a text amendment to a portion of the East Lake Garfield character area within the walkable urban code text that was approved last July by the City Council. And then the last one is the actual mapping exercise related to changing the zoning for parcels within the TOD1 area that are within the East Lake Garfield area. So our overall boundaries for this are I-10 on the north, 7th Street on the east, the 51, or 7th Street on the west, the 51 on the east, and the Union Pacific Railroad on the south. You see it on the aerial right up here above you. And so on the next slide, our Reinvent Phoenix process, as noted, was started in 2011 with a $3.9 million planning grant from the federal government to look at how we can reinvent ourselves around a city that was car-dominated to one that has walkable and TOD-friendly and urban style of development within our downtown, the areas along the light rail line. So it's been a lengthy process. We are now in the third step of that, which is the mapping exercise here. So you'll recall a lot of things were before the council back last June and July when the transit district plans, these ones here, were adopted by the mayor and council, and then the walkable urban code was also adopted by the council in July. That just put it in the zoning ordinance as chapter 13. We're now going forward as directed by the subcommittee and full council to change the zoning, which effectively makes those properties have the zoning that they can build without going through a zoning process to be consistent with the plans that have been adopted by the mayor and council. And with that, to go over the specifics, I'm going to hand this off to Ms. Hoffman.
Thank you. Good morning. The pictures on the screen are showing you the outreach the staff did. I think they did a fantastic job showing up to the neighborhood to outreach to them regarding the two items, the general plan amendment and the walkable urban code being mapped in the East Lake Garfield neighborhood. When we brought the walkable urban code to the city council, we were directed by the council to do enhanced outreach. So starting in June of 2015, staff started the outreach where they did more than any other applicant that was normally doing a general plan amendment or a rezoning would do. We had over 2,100 notification letters that were mailed out. We had over 36 meetings with residents, property owners, business owners. We included one-on-one meetings as were requested or as we reached out to others, and we had the signs that were posted as well. So the area of the East Lake Garfield District is up on the screen, and the area of focus for the Walkable Urban Code and the General Plan Amendment is the dark area there outlined, which is our interim transit overlay district. And the intent when we did the interim district was to address the planning we needed to do along the light rail for a period of time until we could get the final zoning. Well, we are now here at the final zoning time with the Walkable Urban Code. The key element of it is getting the general plan amendment. We need to map the area so that we can have the mixed use types that we have embedded into the Walkable Urban Code. So 188 acres, a little over 188 acres, are included in the general plan amendment. Now, as we had the outreach to the different neighborhood groups, the businesses, we realized that there was an item that we hadn't addressed in the Walkable Urban Code, and so we've added a text amendment to the request that we're moving forward with. One of the things we found out is a lot of the property in East Lake Garfield is zoned for multifamily, but a lot of them have single-family homes on them. And so what we've done is a text amendment to ensure that homes that are in multifamily, that are single-family use, are going to have additional buffer setbacks from the Walkable Urban Code development. So again, staff listened as we went forward to the public meetings, and we are addressing that by moving forward with this text amendment. With that, I will turn this over to Craig to talk about the actual mapping exercise.
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, first of all, this is a team effort, and over the course of the past year, with the leadership of Mr. Stevenson and Ms. Hoffman, we'd be able to pull this off and bring this to you. I'd also like to recognize Catherine Coles, Jody Strohmeyer, and Vanya Fletcher for a lot of hard work over the past year to get to this point. So the rezoning case is the vision of the Reinvent Phoenix plan itself, and so you can see the outline in black being the TOD1, always meant to be an interim overlay to help facilitate growth along the light rail as well as near the light rail stations. So the different colors on this particular transect map show the varying degrees of zoning that we're requesting for this particular area. Over the course of the past year, we've had extensive outreach with the community, and there's a lot of excitement up to this point to have the Walkable Urban Code implemented within the East Lake Garfield community. So with that said, we are recommending requesting approval from the NHD per the Planning Commission recommendation for the 3 cases. Separate motions for each, for the general plan amendment, for the rezoning, as well as the text amendment.
Wonderful, thank you. We have a card from Michael Lafferty marked in favor. If you're ready.
Good morning, Madam Chair.
And our taller guests can take the microphone out if you, or raise it.
Can you hear me? Yes. So, have microphone difficulties. I just wanted to talk about the effort. I was on the steering committee appointed by the mayor, and we spent 4 years on this plan, and a lot of hard work went on this plan. And again, excuse me, I'm Mike Lafferty at Lafferty Development, and I own the majority of the property around the 12th Street light rail stations. And in fact, I'm one of the first 2 cases that are going through under the WU code currently. But we worked on this for 4 years. The public outreach, the number of letters that they discussed were there. The meetings did occur, and one-on-one meetings occurred. They occurred with me. And then what was a bit disturbing was some of the people and neighbors and some of the major people come at the very end and claim they didn't understand. And so too much hard work was put into that to have that happen. And the letters, the amount of letters that went out that I received personally on all our properties. But I think we got through it. We had a rough vote at the village, but we did get through it. This is a community plan, not a city plan. And the community developed and designed the plan. And so I voted for the plan. I've been asked by certain people, do you believe that you should have this height or this option? And my answer is, I believe in the plan. And so I voted for the plan. And so that has held up. Earlier when Christine was speaking about the housing, on the St. Ambrose project that you know is on Van Buren, because the Van Buren corridor was a part of this Reinvent Phoenix, is currently going to provide for the 48% sector of the $35,000 income. And it's called attainable housing. I'm getting a 221 D4 loan. And the majority of the units will curtail to that 48% number through what's called attainable housing, because affordable has subsidies. So, but the entire project is considered workforce housing or affordable for students, so it's multi-generational. And we also have a current project coming through that's market-driven, called the Monument and White House Hotel, that we're focused on a large portion of that being in that 35 to 40 or 40 to $50,000 range. So we do have workforce housing coming, or low market rate driven housing. So just wanted to bring that up and support the Reinvent Phoenix Eastlake Garfield plan.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
So our Economic Development Director has the goal of 2% additional housing, and you're going to do it by yourself.
I actually have a comment about that. Our white papers show that 2%, the current amount of units that are coming downtown could be tripled.
All right.
And that we have the white papers to prove it. Don't tell the other developers that.
You've got quite the head start. Wonderful. Thank you. That is all the cards I have on these items. Do we have any council member questions? Well, thank you to the community members, the staff. This really has been many years in the making, many passionate debates about the future of our city and the corridor, and we really appreciate. I think this will be something we will get more national attention for, really bringing together across so many different sectors, departments, data from a wide variety of sources. So thank you to everyone who has worked on this. We're looking forward to the next step. With that, I think we need 3 motions.
I move staff request approval for per Planning Commission recommendation for number 1, GPA CC 1-16-8. Also, and you want to do it, can we do it one at a time, or can we put it all together?
Madam Chairman, I think you can put them all together. It's
Okay.
relatively
Number
clear.
2, ZTA-2-16, and number 3, Z9-16-8.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Passes unanimously. Wonderful. Thank you. We are welcoming Cindy Stotler back to the microphone for Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher Program update. This is one we received feedback from the community and have been very responsive to that feedback.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. With me up here is Nicole Ayula, the manager over the Section 8 program. And in light of the time, I'm going to go quickly. We promised to come back to you about the waitlist opening. We had to delay it from May in order to create a Spanish language application. And so in order to do that, we had to work with programmers and do a lot of programming behind the scenes. So our new date is August 8th. It will open at 9 a.m. on August 8th. It's still an online application. We will remain open for applications until we reach 10,000 or for 5 days until the 12th. The programming behind the scenes is so complicated because both applications have to be available simultaneously. And if you pick the Spanish one, and if I click right now, I need to be able to click on that and then make sure that it goes in. We're required by HUD to take them first in, first out. So if it goes in, my Spanish one goes in right before the English one, the programming behind the scenes has to maintain that integrity of who is turning in their application. So we think that by August 8th, we will have it all wrapped up and ready to go, and everything is on target for August 8th. We also promised to come back and talk about the rent reasonableness process. There were some questions about how we compare rents and determine the rent. So I will let Nicole describe the process.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. We have brought this back to you for discussion. We understand that there was some concern about whether or not the rent reasonable process was actually being measured against market rate units, or was it being measured against other unassisted units. The process that we work with, the vendor that we work with is called GoSection8.com. It is a database of units out in the market to conduct our rent reasonable comparisons. Those comparisons are against unassisted units. So any unit that is not assisted or does not receive a subsidy, that's how the comps are actually established. And then it feeds into the payment standard, which is set by HUD based on fair market rents. So once a rent is approved by our department for a landlord, it is compared against the payment standard that is set by HUD. The next item up that we're going to discuss is our HUD VASH allocation. Not more than a month, maybe 6 weeks ago, HUD reached out to us and asked us to apply for an additional allocation of 40 VASH vouchers here for the city of Phoenix. We did that rather quickly. I think we brought that information to you and let you know that we had a 1-week turnaround or something in order to apply. So on June 2nd, we did receive a notice that we were awarded those additional VASH vouchers. So that brings our VASH allocation here in the city of Phoenix up to 903. Currently, I think we're at somewhere around 763 in terms of leased VASH vouchers right now. This is our 9th allocation since we first started receiving them. So we're doing pretty well.
So again, those VASH vouchers, we work in cooperation with the VA, the Veterans Administration, who provides supportive services. So they funnel the needy veterans, the homeless veterans, to us for the vouchers. We give them the voucher, and then the Veterans Administration provides the supportive services that they need to remain housed appropriately. The next thing we offered to come back and talk to you about was the domestic violence and human trafficking, the need for vouchers for victims of domestic violence and human trafficking. When we had a discussion before, we talked about the set-asides that we have for vouchers for the chronically homeless and, of course, the veterans. Several of you had asked if we had any set-asides available for domestic violence and victims of human trafficking. We did not, so we said we would look into that. I've been working very closely with Mo Gallegos, the Human Services Director, because he is in close communication with the social services agencies that work with victims of domestic violence and human trafficking. There is a strong interest from all of those service agencies providing services to these victims. There is not yet a logistical way to determine how to funnel those victims cleanly and expeditiously through to Section 8 to award them vouchers. We do not yet know what the need is in order to determine how many vouchers need to be set aside. And then lastly, we're still working with the service agencies to see if they need wraparound services similar to what we provide with the chronically homeless. And if they do, then how would that be serviced? How would that be provided via contract? And how would that be maintained financially? So we have a lot of logistics to work out behind the scenes, but there's definitely an interest there, and we're definitely pursuing some set-asides for victims of domestic violence and human trafficking. So what we'd like to do is come back to you in the fall. We've had a little more time to work with Human Services and the social services agencies to come up with a plan of how it would work behind the scenes to get these victims to vouchers, connected with vouchers, and stay housed. And then also we need to determine the need. So how many vouchers we would want to propose that be set aside for these victims. So I think we'll have more details and a lot more information for your feedback if we come back in the fall.
And certainly it wouldn't, I guess I would love to see if we could allow people the opportunity to self-identify as a member of one of these groups. Certainly it would not be the only data that we would need to develop a program, but we may not have this application again for quite a while, and at least we will have that data. If it turns out that it's not a good source and we can't use it, then we can go from there. But at least if we collect the data when the application opens on August 8th, it gives us one more potential tool. So is it possible that our vendor could include that in the application?
I can certainly look into that, Madam Chair. It's not a line item that's identified on there right now, but we can look into that and let you know.
Great.
If we can't get it into the online application, we could certainly do it is that as a pre-application that just gets you on the wait list? Once we select you, you have to come in and do a full-blown application and sit there with our counselor. So we could include that information at the full-blown counseling and make sure that we track that for you.
Wonderful. Just think we don't open this all the time, and it's our chance to get good data. I think this council wants to use Section 8 as a tool to further the values of this community, and this will give us one more opportunity to do that. It may not be the perfect tool, but while we have it, love to see us take that.
That concludes our update on the items that you had requested. I'll take any questions.
Wonderful. Thank you for making sure that our Spanish language residents have this opportunity. We do have one card from Zachary Dorn with Community Legal Services.
Madam Chairwoman, members of the subcommittee, thank you for allowing me some time to speak. My name is Zachary Dorn. I'm a staff attorney with Community Legal Services. Our organization is committed to eliminating poverty-based inequities in our community, in the civil justice system, and providing high-quality legal advocacy to low-income Arizonans. First, I want to thank the Housing Department for their tremendous work on helping integrate Spanish language and LEP programs into the waitlist program. We know that it's been a very difficult process, and it's a technically complex thing to have to do. That said, we do still have two concerns that we would like to raise, and our Director of Advocacy, Pamela Bridge, will be sending a letter to the Housing Department outlining these concerns in greater detail. The first concern that we have as CLS is the use of the first come, first serve system. Community Legal Services believes that a better approach would be to use a lottery-based system. This is a system that other comparable cities around the country have used, such as Seattle and Houston. The advantage of this approach is that it helps eliminate potential disparate impacts of individuals with disabilities who may have a difficult time applying for the wait list and would need additional time. There is a recent HUD guidance from 2012 that recommends the use of a lottery system or some other randomized selection process in awarding vouchers for individuals who have applied for the wait list. The second concern that we have is the last time that we have seen the form of the application is there was a question on the application that asked about arrests or time spent in jail or prison. There was a very recent, as of April, I believe April 4th, guidance from the HUD Office of General Counsel regarding questions about arrest records. The guidance said that arrests should not be the subject of an inquiry for housing providers because it does not have a reliable basis for determining eligibility for housing. And so that is a question that we would ask be removed from the application process because we believe it could have a chilling effect on individuals who have been arrested but not convicted and may discourage them from applying for the waitlist program or for the waitlist for the Section 8 program. And with that, thank you very much.
Would you like to follow up offline with Community Legal Services? That would wonderful. Thank you for your partnership and making sure we have a good Section 8 process. That is all the cards I have today. Any council member questions? Wonderful. We do not have any cards for public comment. Do folks have, we already have a fairly full agenda for September, but I'm hopeful we'll have other good news, including maybe a Choice Neighborhoods update. Any other requests for agenda items? With that, we are adjourned. Thank you.